slides. Of course, I can't hear you, so if you could say in the chat box, you can see, okay, Mike is nodding, thank you. So we're talking about dealing with the great unknown today. And what I want to say is that obviously we're living through an extraordinary time. You know, we've never ever been in a situation like this. You know, we've had other crises, whether it was a financial crisis or we've had, you know, the Iraq war. There's a number of things that we've been through, the dot-com bubble, which was clearly very painful for anyone who was in that particular space. But what we've not seen before is something on such a global scale, which almost like a Mexican wave seems to be hitting different countries. And, you know, they can all see it coming, but they still seem to be quite unprepared on how to deal with it. And I think what is clear is that this is going to impact every single one of us. Obviously not in the same way, but we're all going to be impacted. And so it's really important for us to get the sense of us collectively being in the situation, but the impact is going to be very personal and individual. And so I want to today just help you to maybe think about some of these issues without giving you lots of answers. So I want to manage your expectations. You know, we're not going to be talking about COVID-19. I don't have any particular fresh insight or solutions on when this is going to end. I certainly don't know where you can access toilet paper or hand sanitizers, you know, because we're all in the same boat. But what I am going to do is give you some food for thought and hopefully help you to think about some of these seemingly really complex issues in a more simple way. So first off, what are we breaking through? So when I talk about create your own breakthrough, breakthrough obviously means very different things to different people, and it could be something that's personal to you, or it could be something of a collective. It could be a community thing. It could be a corporate thing. It doesn't really matter, you know, because at the end of the day, life is a series of mini and major breakthroughs. But I think there are some ingredients that apply to all of them, and we're going to talk about some of those today. So what I want to first of all say is that when we think about the change we're facing today, it's kind of very Darwinian in some ways, isn't it? Because it's something that nobody expected. We were not really prepared for it. And we're going to have to each assess to see how it is that we are going to, so I'm trying to admit somebody in and I can't seem to do it. Okay. How it is that we're going to adjust to what's going on now, to our personal reality. And this quote is obviously one of my favorite ones. You know, every time we've had a crisis, you know, I like to remind myself that it's not important for you to be the strongest person, or for you to have lots of money, or to be the brightest person out there. But what is really important is your willingness and ability to go with the flow and adapt to the change. And I think every one of us is going to have to do that to some extent. So there's two ways of thinking about it. When you think about what life brings, you know, in terms of challenges and opportunities, generally there are two kinds of people. Now obviously that's a gross generalization because there's many more than two kinds of people, but essentially we have people who have the owner's mindset. And what that means is they take responsibility for what's going on. They take ownership of their own role in whatever's going on. And they will accordingly behave in a certain way, which is going to be very much, you know, looking within and looking to see how they can actually change who they are and how they come across in any given situation. On the other hand, you have the victim mindset, where people look at a situation and they instantly want someone to blame. Maybe they feel that, you know, they need to have someone to blame for them to feel better about the situation. And typically those kind of people will not be able to respond from a position of, you know, self-awareness or self-belief, or even, you know, the ability to exercise self-control. So in a sense, when you are somebody who looks at something and think, oh, life is happening to me compared to life is happening for me, life happening to you is slightly victim mode. Whereas if you say, oh, this is okay, this has happened for me, and what can I learn from it? You know, what is it that is meant to be teaching me that could change the way I am or the way I live? So I think for you to really look at yourself in any given situation, and I'm not suggesting that we don't all have times when we become victims. You know, we've all been there when we feel sorry for ourselves. But I think it's just stepping back and just asking yourself that question: this has happened for me. How do I want to show up in this situation? Do I want to be a victim and find someone to blame? Or do I want to be that person who accepts that this has happened, and now I'm going to look at ways in which I can then respond in a way that feels right? So I think if you think about what breakthrough needs from us, is we need to get really clear on what we want. And it's easier said than done, because I don't know if you've ever had an experience where, you know, you're not feeling very comfortable in a certain situation, and all you can do is really think about all the things you don't want. So you can make a long list of the things that are not working for you, that you're not happy about, but to actually articulate clearly what it is you actually want is not as easy as that. So I would say getting clear on what we really, really want will help us to, first off, just you know, articulate that, and also then, you know, sort of make it very, very clear of what is not acceptable to you. And then the second thing from there is to learn how to ask for it. So you've articulated what you want, and then you may realize that you can't alone create that situation for you, in which case you're going to need help from other people, and learning how to ask for it, how to actually go out there and create this thing that you want is the other piece of that puzzle. And when you've learned to do both of those things really well, you will find that you consistently create breakthroughs. However, what you will find is that there are three things that generally hold you back from even taking that next step to creating a breakthrough. So the first thing is what I call fog. And as this picture is suggesting to you, sometimes, you know, life feels like it's fog. You know, you don't really know what's ahead. You don't have a lot of visibility, and you are really not sure when you've moved forward or back what you're actually going to find. The second is freeze. And what I mean by that is the inability to really know what your next step should be. You know, which way should you turn? What is the next action that you need to take? And the final one is, of course, failure. And, you know, failure is something that we all dislike. I mean, even people who are good at failing, and I would say that I'm probably one of these people who is reasonably good at failing, but I don't like the feeling of it. It's not particularly comfortable. So how do we look at these three things? So the first one, which is fog, I just want to sort of expand a little bit on it. So there's obviously the fog, which is the external fog, and that's the one I want to talk about first. So we talked about the great unknown, which has occurred because of this, the virus that's come along, and it has changed everything. You know, it has changed the way we live, it has changed the way we interact with the people around us, and it's changed the way we now think about our future. So typically you would have your little comfort zone. Now your comfort zone may involve obviously your home life, your family, but it also means, you know, where you go to work, you know, your job, and possibly other things that you do in the community. But suddenly you have a dynamic where maybe your comfort zone has changed or it's disappeared. You know, it could be that your job no longer exists, or it could be that your home life looks very different. Maybe it feels a lot more cramped because we're all, you know, to some degree or another, we're living through this lockdown, and suddenly, you know, you have all members of your family cooped up in the space that used to be relatively, you know, free, and it just doesn't feel so comfortable anymore. And on top of that, you have this great unknown, and the media is not helping, because every single day you're hearing all about more people who've died, you know, how many people have caught the infection, you know, the destruction that it's leading in terms of industry and jobs. And that's just a small list of all the unknowns out there that we have no control over. So it is quite easy to get overwhelmed by all this unknown stuff that we really have not got the ability to do anything about. But in this process, we can sometimes forget that there is another part to the great unknown, which includes some really wonderful things. You know, there is abundance, you know, there's beauty, friendship. And actually what's interesting, and you may have noticed this yourself, that even though in this crisis we have a small minority of people who are behaving in a disgraceful manner, maybe they're hoarding stuff and then trying to sell it at a massive premium, or they're behaving in ways that are not, you know, becoming in this situation. But equally, on the other end of the spectrum, you have some amazing generosity, you know, some real people going beyond, you know, their call of duty. And I think, you know, it's the ability to really get a sense that the unknown is not just black and white. You know, there's many, many shades of it. And within, of course, all of this, there is clearly opportunity, which may not be clear right now, but it is definitely there. So in real life, of course, I mean, this is a very nice graphic, even if I say so myself, but in real life, you're not going to know which part of the unknown is good and bad. You know, it's all mixed in together. And so the only way we're going to know that is to go within and find ways in which to identify both the negatives, but also the positives, and then make a decision on which ones we're really going to focus on. So the first thing I want to say to you is that whether it's supplies of things that you really need that you can't get hold of, you know, this image made me laugh, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of somebody who's just used their last bit of toilet roll and don't have any more in stock. And what you can do, really, the simplest thing to do when you have so many things outside of your control, is to really create a mental list or even a physical list of the things that you can control. And then focus really your thoughts and attention on those things. And what your thoughts tend to do is your thoughts create energy. And where your energy and attention goes, you know, that's where really change can happen. So if you can now take all of your focus and energy and really try and, you know, aim them at the things that you know you can control, you're much more likely to get some positive outcomes, or at least outcomes that you can explain and you can, to some extent, live with. Everything else that's outside your control, there really is very little point in worrying about it and getting too anxious. Now, I know this is easier said than done. And so I'm not suggesting that at the end of this webinar, suddenly you're all going to be amazing at, you know, focusing only on the things you can control. But what I want to say to you is that if you can do this literally on a daily basis, you know, second by second, hour by hour, just literally try and train your mind to not worry about the things that are outside of your control, and really look around you in your home, in your life, within yourself, and identify the things that you can control and then take action with those. Is this all making sense? Let me just check in with people. So what I would love for you to do at some point is to start putting in the chat box, and I need to find out how to get the chat box again because it seems to have disappeared. But if you could, you know, if you've got any thoughts, comments, questions, use that chat box as a way to literally just allow your thoughts to go in, and don't hold them back because you're probably going to forget. So this is the first thing to do, focus on things you control. The next thing I want to talk about is the freeze aspect of the three things that hold you back. Now, freeze is sort of a natural consequence of the fog. You know, if you don't really know what's out there, then it's very hard to know what the right thing to do is. So it could be partly because you don't really know what you want, or it could be that you don't really know what's available to you for you to choose from. Or sometimes it can be that you have far too much choice and you don't really know which one to go with because maybe you have 50 things to choose from and you don't really know which one of those 50 things is right for you, or, you know, which ones really should be, should be the right thing for you to access right now. So I think the freeze comes sometimes as a result also of, certain labels that we place upon ourselves. So I want to explore that. I want to ask you to really think about what labels you think are limiting you. And if you have a notepad and pen or something, if you got, a phone in which you take notes, I want you to just maybe take a moment to really identify what labels you've set upon yourself. It could be that you think, oh, well, I'm not very good at maths. And I'm going to tell you a little story that I've shared in the past about how one experience or, a time in your life where you have a certain negative or positive experience can make you believe that that's all you're capable of, or something that you're not capable of. So while you're doing that, I'm just going to have a quick read of some of these chats and comments so that we keep it interactive. Okay, so here we go. So Josna is saying, trying to get clear has landed me having 2 or 3 choices, all in different directions. One of the strongest desires I have right now is to pursue PhD. Okay, so she sent me this privately, and I've just read it out to everyone, but that's okay. And I think it's for people who are talented and who have lots of potential. This is a real issue. You could find that you could possibly be doing, 2 or 3 different things really well, but you obviously can't. You have to pick 1 or 2, and that could be really, really difficult a choice to make. And you either have to decide to maybe multitask a little bit, like I'm trying to do now and not very well all the time, or decide, listen, I'm going to focus all of my energy and attention on this thing, and then I'm going to give it my all, and then see how it goes. And I think you're right, Mike, that society tends to want us to do that. Society does not like people who are seen as jack of all trades and master of none. But I think if you look at the full quote of jack of all trades, master of none, I think, I can't remember the exact quote, and if somebody can find it for me, that would be great. Put it in the chat box. But essentially it says that sometimes what we need is people who are not masters of just one thing, but who are generalists, who can do lots of different things. And so Viveka was saying that the unknown being also a space for growth, abundance, and opportunity. Absolutely. Sometimes we lose sight of even things that are really potentially controllable by us. We can lose the ability to discriminate for several reasons. Completely agree. And I would love, Mike, for you to elaborate on that a bit later on, because I think to sometimes it's not so straightforward to know whether something is in our control or it's not, especially if you've never faced a certain situation before. So I mean, the virus situation, for instance, I'm an optimist, and I like to look on the bright side of most things, and I'm trying really, really hard not to get pulled down by all the negative news. So I don't watch the news very much at all. But occasionally I need to be reminded, but that I probably should take this more seriously. Maybe I should be wearing gloves, maybe I should be wearing a mask, because if I'm thinking, well, actually I could catch the virus even if I'm really careful. So, do I really want to restrict my life so much? I'm going to just focus on, building my immune system and keeping my house clean and washing my hands and all the rest of it. But perhaps what I need to do is also extend that control to other areas. So I hope that makes sense. And just saying that one decides the one thing is the right thing, it comes with an opportunity cost. Yeah, exactly. Because, our time is precious, and you may see an opportunity today that you may worry that that opportunity may not come back for you. And by not taking it today, are you maybe somehow limiting yourself? So there's lots and lots of ways to think about labels and limitations. So I want to go back to that for a second. And I want to tell you a story that sort of, for me, was a really early lesson. And some of you may have heard this story before, but when I was about 10 or 11, and I was studying in a school in Delhi, I was generally quite blessed with being a bit of a teacher's pet. Most teachers liked me. I was generally quite good with, getting on with my studies and being a sort of bit of a SWAT, basically. But this particular teacher, for whatever reason, took an irrational dislike to me, and she was my maths teacher. And what she would do, and she didn't, I don't think she just did it to me, but obviously I remember my experience, she probably did it to the other students as well. She would put on the blackboard a problem, and then she would get one of us to come up to the blackboard and solve it. And generally the problem would be something quite complex, and every time I was called to the blackboard, I just stood there not knowing what to do. And it was just the most humiliating, excruciating feeling. I could feel the eyes of my classmates on my back, probably feeling sorry for me. Maybe some of them were laughing at me. Whatever it was incredibly humiliating, and I felt ashamed and helpless, and it was not nice. And so what I did was I went to my mum. After this had happened a few times, I went to my mum and I said that I hate maths. My maths teacher hates me, and can you come to my school and complain about her or tell her off? And my mum said to me, she said, well, I could do that, but I'm not sure that's going to really help, because this teacher may become even more vindictive and she may pick on you even more. And so what my mum wanted me to do was to come home after school and do maths for 10 or 15 minutes every day. Just practice, practice, practice. That's what she wanted me to do. And she thought that if I did that, then I would get better at maths, and then this woman wouldn't be able to do that to me. And of course, it wasn't a very popular, it wasn't a very sort of, it's not what I wanted to hear from my mother. I wanted my mother to be my knight in shining armor and go and, fight with this woman and tell her to back off. And my mum wouldn't do that for me. But all credit to my mother. I did what she said, because she had these 20 problems that she would have for me every day to work on. And I actually got better at maths, and to the point where I started to do really well in my tests. And at first my teacher couldn't believe, she thought I'd cheated, but she did stop picking on me. And in the following year, when I moved to a different city and I had a different teacher who was amazing and who absolutely loved maths, and he injected in me a love of maths, which has stayed with me to this day. So the reason I tell you the story is that it comes back also to something Dr. Carol Dweck talks about mindset. She talks about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And the fixed mindset is really, if, for instance, in that moment, if I had believed from that maths teacher that I was stupid, that I was not good at maths, maybe I would have gone through the rest of my life believing that maths was not for me and that I was not good at it. And my whole life's trajectory would have been different, because I did actually go on to do a degree in maths, and I did actually go on to work in finance. So I think being aware of what labels are limiting you is really important, because they might be the things that are holding you back. They could be positive labels as well, because sometimes it could be that you have a job, you have a really high-paying job that that you've got comfortable to that, having that kind of salary, and so now suddenly, if making a change means that you do a lower paying job, that just feels too limiting. You've got this millstone around your neck, which means that you need that salary. So whatever it is, I think I would suggest to you that you take some time to identify what those labels are. So Tatiana is saying, I had exactly the opposite. I was told I'm good at maths and bad at languages. It stayed with me for a long time. Do you know, it's incredible how people unthinkingly put these labels on us, and sometimes it's done with love, and it's done with the best of intentions, and sometimes our parents create these limits for us. Yeah, and I think Tatiana, the fact that you speak Russian, German, and English, first of all, it's amazing that you're multilingual, so many languages. But I think for us to just remember the power our words have on other people, and for us to be mindful that we don't create these labels for our children, the people we work with, and generally the people in our lives, that's also helpful, but also going within and identifying what labels have limited us. Okay, so let's move on from that. So the final one, failure, something I have to say I'm very good at, and I've got lots of experience of failing and bouncing back, is I think something that, again, coming back to what labels and society does for us, is that it creates this aversion to failure. You know, if I can sort of think about people who are particularly good and who may have really done extremely well in certain situations and have got used to success, I think failure for them becomes even harder. So if you've been somebody who's like super talented, always done well in your, you know, school exams, you've probably been really successful in your career, and you've just got used to success, you know, the very idea of failing might make you feel almost sick. Um, is there any part of your life where you feel that that has limited you and stopped you from exploring something different? That's the first thing to think about. The second thing in terms of failure is that failure can come in many different ways. You know, failure does not have to mean that you take an exam and then you fail. You know, failure can simply be that you had a setback. You know, if someone is a perfectionist, you know, as you probably know, perfectionism is the killer of dreams. You know, you might be someone who is so determined that the things you do need to be perfect that you just never take that next step because you just don't want to be doing anything that's less than perfect. Now, the thing about perfection is that it is such a moving goalpost. If any one of you is a perfectionist, I would love for you to give me your thoughts on how you deal with this, because if you think that perfection is, you know, here, by the time you've done something and you've got there, I bet you your idea of what perfection is will have moved on. So you're always going to be playing catch up. You're always going to feel that it's not quite good enough. So this beautiful graphic was actually made for me as a thank you by one of my clients who, as you can see, his talent is drawing. And what Jack Ambrose came to me with when we first started working together, he was a, you know, in his sort of early 20s, mid 20s. He had worked in a PR firm, in a healthcare PR firm, because he was a science graduate. He'd been really good, you know, with science. He'd done really well in it, and he'd gone to university doing a science specialization, even though at the time his original gut instinct had been to go and do graphic design or something to do with art. He had changed his mind and decided maybe a career in science was more rewarding. But having sort of worked in it for a couple of years, he realized it was not what he wanted to do, and that he really wanted to make a career out of, you know, his drawing and his love for drawing. And it felt almost impossible because he didn't know what kind of job it would be and how well or badly he would be paid for it. But the thing that held him back most was his perfectionist streak, that he didn't want to put his stuff out there if he didn't think it was good enough, or if he felt that people would judge it harshly. So I think a lot of the work that we did, that I did with Jack, was to help him see that what really mattered was progress, not perfection. And I think this is a lesson for us all, to enjoy failure and see it almost as, you know, fail as in being the frequent attempts in learning, rather than something that, you know, is going to label us as someone who's not good enough. So these are kind of the three areas to think about. And in my following webinars, the next one will be on next Tuesday, I'm going to flesh out some of these things and talk about how we can really overcome these three things that generally can hold us back. But for now, what I want to do is I want to bring up one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Joe Dispenza from his book, You Are the Placebo, in which he says the best way to predict your future is to create it, not from the known, but from the unknown. And this is the reason I love this so much, is because, you know, very often we tend to extrapolate from where we are. So whatever we're doing today, you know, whether it's a job, you know, a corporate job that you've done for the last 10 years, and you look at your CV and you think, well, you know, the best option for me is to do something that's related to what I've done before, or perhaps, you know, do something similar for a different company, or, you know, maybe move into another geographic area that's not too dissimilar to what I've done before. And that's completely normal. That is how, you know, we have been taught to actually think about our future, take baby steps and not stray too far from the, firmly trodden path. However, when you have the kind of change we have now, where everything is up in the air, that trodden path maybe doesn't even exist anymore, and suddenly all these different paths may be emerging, and we have this once in a lifetime opportunity to create something from scratch, to almost press the reset button on our lives and think, well, if I had to start today and think about my life, for the next 10 years, 15 years, how would I want it to look? If I wasn't going to be limited by any of my labels, if I was not just looking at the fog on the outside, but I was addressing the fog that's inside my mind, all those cobwebs that years of, just following other people's opinions and, a structure and plan that you laid out 10 years ago that you're still following, even though it doesn't feel right. If you had a really good clear out inside your mind, not just, decluttering in your home, you may suddenly find that some new inspiration is created. I want to give you an analogy. If you're somebody who's decluttering, and I know a number of us are doing this now, because, well, if you have more time on your hand, why not? You will find that in your wardrobes or drawers or whatever, you'll suddenly discover things that you'd completely forgotten you had. You may also discover things that have been sitting there for like 10, 15 years that you have not used, and you've decided you're never going to use them again. It could be a pair of jeans, a size 8 pair of jeans that you were hoping one day you were going to fit into. And now maybe it's the time to decide, what? Life is too short. I am not going to lose that much weight and it's never going to fit me. So maybe it's time for me to get rid of that. When you do that, not only, first of all, do you remind yourself of things that you had in your space that you had forgotten about, that you're really delighted you found, because maybe you have use for them, but you also make space for new things. You have suddenly freed up space so you can actually bring in fresh stuff. And it's exactly the same with our minds. When you clear out the fog, you sort of dust off the cobwebs, and you get rid of stuff that is not serving you anymore, you create some space to be inspired by new things. They say that we actually only use 5% of our brain capacity, and that's where the conscious mind resides. So that means 95% of our brain capacity is lying idle, because we don't know how to tap into it. And that's where we get it from the unknown. We get it from our subconscious. So a lot of the unknown is actually within us, not just outside. So I would urge you really to think about this as an amazing once in a lifetime opportunity to create the future you want. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just recap this with the 7 steps to dealing with uncertainty, or you can call it the great unknown. The first one is to get really clear on the things you want. Things you really, really want, and the more you dig deep and the more you're able to articulate what you want, the more the chances are that you're going to get it. Secondly is to really consciously become an owner in your life. Stop finding people to blame. I'm not saying that you suddenly become judgmental toward yourself and take responsibility or take the blame. Taking responsibility is quite different to taking blame. So it does not mean that suddenly when somebody behaves badly or you're in a car accident, which was clearly someone else's fault, that you have to now sit there and say, oh, I'm going to be an owner and I'm going to take, I'm going to believe this was my fault. No, it's not that. It's just taking ownership of what you could do differently next time, or how you could respond in that particular situation. Because in your response to any given stimulus, you are creating your future. And in every given moment in our lives, we are creating both our future and our past. Because what we're doing right now, so first of all, thank you for taking an hour out of your busy lives, even if you're in lockdown, to join me, because that's precious and you're never going to get it back. But in this hour, collectively, we are sowing the seeds, we're laying the foundation for you to create both your past and your future. Third thing is to focus on things you can control. And if you can, make a mental list or an actual list of what these are. And every time you find your mind wandering off to think about things that are clearly outside your control, like what's going on in politics or what's going on in some other country that maybe you have an interest in but you don't live in, it's pointless because you really can't control it. So just become mindful of that. Identify the labels that are limiting you, because the thing that stops people from achieving their potential is not just their limitations, but it's never knowing what's possible for them. So I think once you've actually identified what your limitations are, and then you can do something to overcome them, and you've freed up some space in your brain because you got clear on it, you are then paving the way to really exploring what's possible for you. And in my next two webinars, I'm going to be talking more about that. I think when you've done some of this work, you know, the freeze element, what the freeze element does is that it creates lots of, oh, I'm not so sure, I think I can do this, or maybe, those are not terribly confidence provoking in the person who's asked you a question. So if somebody comes to you with an opportunity, say, someone says to me, Ro, listen, I have this talk that I'm arranging for International Women's Day. Do you think you could come and do it? I could either say, well, let me think about it. Maybe I can do it. Or I could say, absolutely, of course I can do it. Even if I've never done it before, you know, if I just say yes, because my gut says to me, yeah, that sounds really good. I can do it based on what I've learned about myself. I know I can do this. I don't know all the things I need to do. But if I say yes now, then I have time to learn what I need to do. And same with no. You know, somebody might come to you with an offer that is completely not right for you. I think when you've got to know yourself really well, it becomes that much easier to identify it from a mile away and just say, no, I'm sorry, this is not right for me, but thank you for asking. So yes and no with conviction will make a massive difference to your life. So I've got somebody else trying to join in now. So essentially, the final couple of steps that I want you to think about is to focus on progress, not perfection, and catch yourself. Catch yourself when you find yourself judging your own work, or perhaps, you know, deeming it, you know, not good enough. I think there's nothing wrong in striving to do better and to, you know, to achieve some kind of perfection. But I think a far more productive and helpful way to do that is to think, how can I do this thing better than I did yesterday? How can I compete with myself in always trying to do a better job? You know, whether it's in your work, or whether it's in your relationships, or whether it's in the way you learn. It could be, you know, it could really apply to any aspect pretty much in your life. So focus on progress, not perfection. And finally, you know, face your fears, because everything you really want is on the other side of your fears. And a lot of that stuff that you really want is actually resting in the unknown, because your comfort zone, you will get bored in that comfort zone after a while. You will start to feel like you're not learning anything new, that, you know, you've ticked all the boxes, that, you know, the things that you loved once upon a time, maybe you just don't love anymore. So what do? You know, you have to, at that point, expand your comfort zone in some way. Or you may decide, well, this comfort zone is just not right for me. I'm going to have to move to a completely new place. So you can have to step out of it at some point. So the best way to do that is to just face your fears head on and tackle them one at a time. And then just remember all those amazing things that lie in the unknown. You know, just go with the flow. So that pretty much is what I wanted to talk about. And for those of you who don't know me, I just want to give you a little bit of a snapshot on who I am and what I do. So like I said to you before, you know, I have a lot of experience of failure, and I'm actually quite proud of it, because through failing I've learned, and through through learning, I have discovered that it's all good. You know, that you know, as long as you believe in yourself and you believe that there is abundance out there, and that, you know, what you need to do really is take action to find those wonderful things. You know, things will come to you. But I have been helped clearly by the people in my life. You know, the fact that um, okay, Tatiana, thank you so much for joining. The people in our lives help us create the lives we want. You know, we can't do it in isolation. And I think for you, the point is for you to discover who those people are in your life, to acknowledge them, appreciate them, validate them, and also maybe do your bit to be that person in their life. Okay, so we're now going to open up for any comments and questions. You know, we've got about 15 minutes. And I know that one or two of you maybe joined me a little bit later into this webinar. If you did, don't worry, we have recorded this and I will be able to share it with you if you so wish. So I have your email addresses and I will take the liberty of sending you the recording. But if you don't want me to do that, then please email me.